In this episode, I am joined by Gilbert M Gutierrez, Chan Buddhist teacher and a Dharma heir of Master Sheng Yen. Gilbert recounts his early childhood mystical and meditation experiences, his deep dive into closed-door internal martial arts and Neigong systems, and the special abilities he both witnessed and unlocked. Gilbert describes the unusual circumstances leading up to meeting Taiwanese Chan Master Sheng Yen, and how an arduous meditation retreat and a powerful encounter with Quan Yin changed his life forever. Gilbert also discusses exorcisms, ghosts, and vexing spirits, and tells stories of the pitfalls of using spiritual healing to sustain terminally ill patients. So without further ado, Gilbert M Gutierrez. Gilbert Gutierrez, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so delighted to be speaking with you today. And wow, what a remarkable life you've had. The only lay Dharma heir of Master Sheng Yen teaching in North America. That's quite remarkable indeed. But that's not where your story begins, and I'd like to go a little further back if we might. Could you say something about your childhood, the context of your upbringing? I understand you went through and explored many different traditions before you lighted upon Chan. So how did your life begin?
Kicking and screaming, I think, and wanting, I want air, I want warmth, I want food, just like everybody else. It's a very interesting thing because as I grew up, I had strange experiences even from the very beginning of my life that I could not understand. Obviously, I was a young boy and I didn't understand things, but experiences came to me quite early. I remember having a recurring dream of like a light and a very comforting light and a beeping like beep, beep. Every night I would dream. This is when I was very, very young, 2, 3 years old, 4 years old, and a recurring dream. And I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know. All I know is that, and it culminated in this engagement of this light. And it wasn't until much later in my life that I realized that I was experiencing the bardo. And that in that moment, there was this, let's say, partial identity moving towards something that as if some connection in space module, and then connecting in. And it was a very peculiar feeling of that, and knowing that there was a direction or a purpose that was heading there. And so after I reached adulthood, when I realized what it was, it all made sense. There was still that remnant of that before being Gilbert came in was this light. So I had kind of experiences like that. I remember one when I was very young, and it was very interesting. I would say I was probably 3 years old. I know I wasn't in school, and my mom would go out in the daytime, and she would wash the screens from outside. She would spray the screens, and then the screens, the little pockets would fill up with water like a grid. And I would, every time she did that, I got excited, and I would run in front of the window and just sit or stand there and look at these little water pockets evaporate. And my mind was just engaged in this, what I'd call now direct contemplation, but I would just watch these little pockets go until there were no more. So that would take some time, but to me, it was timeless. It was just simply something that felt right. I can't say it felt good, it felt anything. It just felt natural to do that. And it was, to me, on something that felt right to just sit or stand there and look at these things evaporate. But in that time, then there's no thought whatsoever, no thought of time, no thought of anything other than the purpose of observing these little pockets of water evaporate. I know it sounds very maybe trivial, but it's interesting because I don't think very few children of that age would be able to stand there and look at things and have them go away. So right from the very beginning, I was quite a bit of a um, different child, and most of the people around me knew that. And I had this one teacher that would call me Little Man, because the manner in which I spoke was not the speech of a young child. Um, so I guess my previous lifetimes were ripening early in this particular lifetime, but it was very interesting. There was numerous ones like that happened to me as I went along, being young. I was raised as a Roman Catholic, and I became a Roman Catholic. I was looking for something, and that started very early in my life, probably uh, maybe 6 years old, seven, um, and about the time you start going to catechism if you're not in Catholic school. Um, and um, I was always wondering and about about God, about life, things that little kids normally don't entertain at that age, and some people never entertain them at all during their lifetime, which is a shame. But I remember once I started working very early. I must have been maybe 8 years old, and I was working mowing lawns. And this one lady, I mowed her lawn, very elderly lady, very Christian. She always had the gospel radio station on. I could hear it through the window, and but she was somewhat um, less compassionate than she should be. But one day it was very interesting because she she asked me to sit down, and she had a cool glass of water. Now, to me, this was very strange because, being a Mexican worker working for her, I was used to drinking out of the hose. And and so she invited me to sit in the shade in a bench and offered me this cool glass of water. And I knew something was up. This was unusual behavior. And then she began to proselytize to me and to say, have you heard of Jesus? And I said, of course, I've heard of Jesus. And she said, well, he is the gateway to heaven. And then I said, this question has bothered me for a long time. Mind you, I'm only 8 years old or so. It's bothered me for a long time. It's just, what is that? You say that in order to enter into the kingdom of heaven, that one must accept Jesus into your life. Is that true? She goes, yes. And I went, well, what about the people in Africa that have never heard the name Jesus, much less a Christian? Are they destined to be denizens of hell? I didn't say denizens. People going to hell simply because they've never heard the name of Jesus. Is that fair? And it was very interesting what her reaction was. So she goes and takes the cup out of my hand, sets it down, and says, "Go back to work." And but the point was made that at that age, I had questions about Christianity, and I'm not bashing Christianity. I never take people away from their religion. It was my own personal search in terms of what made sense and what didn't make sense, and the way in which some, let's say, fundamentalists look at things is not supportable by reason or by heart, and that troubled me a lot. And so that's why I say I eventually became a roaming Catholic, looking for something that made sense, some purpose that made sense. And I studied quite a bit, and as I had gone into college, obviously, for a kid coming in from a very small town, maybe of 3,000 people, and going to UCLA, that was a big eye opener. But I felt free for the first time to be able to look into things and to not be restricted in one way or another, or to maintain discrimination about things, open to all sorts of thought. And people who have gone to college, they understand that it's a wonderful opportunity to do that. And of course, there was a lot of people that went there to party, and they weren't there in the third quarter of the year. But if people were serious about learning, it was a wonderful time. And so I began to explore meditation in my early years there, and eventually started picking up martial arts, and studied martial arts for quite several years, and studied some closed door systems of martial arts, which are a little bit different than the normal martial arts. They're quite powerful in some ways, and powerful by being soft, but they are very effective. I know there may be people saying from the mixed martial arts, well, those don't stand up. But then again, they haven't seen some things, and normally those things won't be shown. No, they're maybe I'm digressing a little bit, but just to kind of show you the environment that I was studying in. I remember going to one closed door exhibition of different martial arts, but these were only the best. And in this one, there was this one Japanese master doing his kata, very strong, very strong. And you could feel the chi from him, the energy from him was so powerful. And people were very, very impressed. And the next person on the stage, and mind you, this wasn't open to the public, this was a very limited group that was there, was this old Chinese man, very old man, maybe 5'4", 5'5" at the most. And he went onto the stage. And then he invited the Japanese master, which he did not know, to come back onto the stage. And so he puts the Japanese master on the one side of the stage, and he is on the other side facing him. And then he pulls out a tissue like this, and he cuts it in half and turns his back, so the Japanese master is standing like this on the other side of the stage, not knowing what he's going to do. So he's back there, and the Chinese master just is looking at the thing, smiling, and then he goes, and just in that moment, the Japanese master bent over as if he got hit by a cannonball. And he was shocked, because this was not it was shocked because, one, this person's facing the other way, and then the force of it was so much that it really affected his solar plexus, that he was visibly bent over. And how do you explain that? These are not people that would participate in some kind of a martial arts competition, but the Japanese master lost his face and stalked off the stage. I bring this up because recurring themes in life, that things are not as they appear. In Chan, there is a saying, I can't say it in Chinese, but it's from Chinese, and that is what appears to be real is unreal, and what appears to be unreal is real. This is a very, very important aspect of Chan Buddhism, because in Chan Buddhism, we see things not in limitations of the samsaric world, this apparent reality that we are exchanging information on, but beyond that. And that's where our search is when we practice in Chan Buddhism, is what is beyond that? One master, Master Han Shan, said, it is like taking a sword and piercing the sky. Think about that for a moment. Well, I shouldn't say think, contemplate, because you cannot think about, if you rip the sky open, what's there? What's there? Infinite. It's infinite light. It's incredible. But if someone came to me and said, "Oh, it's infinite light," I would show them the meaning of one hand clapping. Chan's way would be to, no, you don't copy people. You have to look for yourself. And that's important. So I'm interjecting some Chan Buddhism in the story so we don't lose course of where we're going with all of this. But I think this might be interesting to people to see, to experience something that's a little bit different than what they've seen before. And so getting back to where I was, and I will digress for a moment, going back into my childhood. There were 2 times in my childhood when I was maybe 9 years old that all of a sudden I stopped and I looked, and I didn't know what I was looking at. I couldn't understand what it was, but I stayed in that position for a long time, but I didn't know what it was. And it got to me because I carried that through into my adult life. And then one day I was driving on the road, and I got a vision of the moment when I was 9 years old, that I was looking into the future, but I didn't know what that meant. But now I am what the 9-year-old was looking at, and looking back at the 9-year-old. And that happened twice. And it explained what was happening at that time. It's very, very strange, because we look at this and we think that time is fixed, and that the time goes sequentially along the same lines as we thinking. And we think we are thinking, and we are thinking in this time frame, but exactly where do we mark the beginning of that time and the sequence of the time? And so it's an interesting thing, because in the upper levels of Chan Buddhism, and you look at someone from the Madhyamaka school, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Madhyamaka school or not, but Nāgārjuna. And if you look at Nāgārjuna, he has an excellent refutation of time and space. It's fascinating because we begin to look at it and we begin to see what appears to be real is not real. And this idea of thought going from here to there is illusory. And even the idea of thought, it is necessary that it's almost binary, like ones and zeros, but it follows a sequential way in which it thinks. But the mind is capable of what Quan Yin talked about, the sixth patriarch of Wu Nien. And Wu Nien is no thought. People have become confused about that. And they teach in an erroneous way that no thought is blanking the mind, not having any thought at all. That is not the case. That's foolhardy. That doesn't reflect the true Chan. Quan Yin didn't say it in that way. What he said was that one doesn't attach to the thought. One follows function, as in this moment I'm speaking to you, and my function is to introduce your listeners to this this level of Chan that perhaps maybe they have not run across before, and thinking that Chan is just sitting and blanking your mind and not thinking. In this very moment right now, I am not thinking. There's not even a Gilbert there. If Gilbert is here, Gilbert would say, how are you doing? Do you think you're doing okay? Are you impressing the people? You should do this or you should do that. No. In Wu Nien, one follows function, and it's like a river. Everything naturally flows. All thoughts naturally flow, but they flow through. They don't stick. When we have a sticky thought, then it stops the mind from this free flow of thinking, and now we begin to engage in this binary thinking of, oh, for instance, a jelly donut comes into mind. And I always use jelly donuts rather than people's vexations, because other people will think, is he talking about me? If I'm talking about drug addiction, sexual addiction, alcohol, whatever, anger or whatever. So I use jelly donut and say, if you have a jelly donut, and then what happens? Then you go, oh, I would like to have one. You start salivating, your stomach is there, and then your mind begins to look at, what kind do I want? I want this jelly donut. Could it be raspberry or lemon? And now you're stuck in the sequential thinking. These are sticky thoughts. And if you eat it, believe me, they will be sticky thoughts, or at least sticky fingers. But the thing is that we call those types of thoughts unwholesome thoughts, or akusala, A-K-U-S-L-A. These akusala thoughts are sticky thoughts because they desire continuation. The ancient masters said, we must sever this mind that desires continuation. This kind of a mind is always seeking something to stick to. On the other hand, if one just simply accords with what is arising in the present moment, this is the practice, is to accord, and we put what is necessary to be there via body, speech, and mind. The right words, the right actions, and the right thinking. So all of these things are there. Now, here is the part that's very interesting about this, is Chan is often taught on a secondary level, where Chan is taught in a way in which we must copy these kinds of actions. The 5 precepts the six paramitas, the Eightfold Path, the 37 factors of enlightenment, as if we were building a staircase to get to where? Exactly where would one get to? Rather, the first level of practice is to resonate in mind and to demonstrate mind via all of these practices. It's a different way of doing things, which is turning the mind's eye inward. And as one turns the mind's eye inward, it sees things differently. And I'll get back to that in a moment. Now we're going to go back to my life. I would call it apparent life. It's nothing but an appearance. And I had studied Kung Fu for a long time. And again, here I was practicing closed door systems, the systems not normally taught in things. And I call it's not your, park or YMCA type of Kung Fu or whatever, Cobra Kai school, whatever. It is much, much deeper, and you develop energy under a well-known advisor, because it can get really, really scary. And so when I practice this, then you develop a system of what's called Neigong. I don't know if you've heard that before. You have. Neigong is like a turbocharged system of chi manipulation. And one learns how to pack the chi in their body. And so it is useful to essentially charge the body with this chi that we pack into the body, and then we can expel it as necessary. It's something very interesting, because as one begins to develop it, you always feel like you want to chew, like, because it stimulates all the way up to your jaw. And so it's not something that you keep in your body. You have to learn how to dissipate the Neigong. So the difference, this is the performance part of this program, is that if one does, and we're using chi, and we're just moving, and this is very light, like a Tai Chi type way. Neigong is like, it's very powerful, and it's used for a specific purpose to expel the chi as is necessary. One doesn't have to go and do that every single time, because after a while the body becomes very very powerful in terms of the potentiality that's there. Because at this point, you're no longer it's no longer a body art, it's a mind art. And you develop this idea of a mind art that can uh, know what to do. And then this is where I began to develop the Wu Nien. And the one teacher that I had, I would go and practice with him in the mornings, and very early in the morning. And every time I played with him, because he had this flowing hands called flower hands, and I couldn't even see it. And he was kind enough not to hit me hard, but I could feel that he was hitting me, but I couldn't see it. No matter how, it was frustrating, because he would be hitting me. And this is after years of practicing different martial arts from like the Tai Chi Chuan to different systems that from even Indonesia and Bagua systems, and he would still be hitting me, and I couldn't see it. And he would say to me, "It's just like taking a walk, just like taking a walk." And I didn't understand what he said. And he would be hitting me and just laughing, because it was effortless for him. He would just go like that, and his hand would just disappear, and I would feel the sensation, but I couldn't see what was happening. So one morning I got there early where we were practicing, and I walked. I just walked around, just walk. So essentially I was engaging in a walking meditation, just walking. And then when we started playing, something very interesting happened. He went from that kind of a movement to this. The mind was so settled that it was without obstruction. And because it was without obstruction, it could perceive things faster, process the information faster. So everything appeared to be in slow motion. And so after that, he would look like he was in slow motion. And then I realized that's the way he was seeing me, was just moving in this slow motion. It was very, very incredible, because when you develop this again is Wu Nien, is no thinking, no thought. And sometimes afterwards, this was after I was with him, because he prohibited us from playing with anybody else other than our school, which was about 2 people. And so he'd say, "You don't play with anyone." So after I was with him, then I started playing with people, and I was stunned. I had no idea, what had been generated, but this mind art was I would say to somebody, throw a punch, and I would catch their hand the moment they were moving forward, right by their body. I would be able to catch their hand. And it was a different art. I mean, you could grab people, move them around as you wanted to. It was a much more incredible power that one utilized, because, of course, there was a lot of eating bitter and physical training that went along with it. It wasn't just simply mind art, but there was the physical training to be able to practice in this way. And I remember going to a party, and one of my friends was telling this martial artist about me, and he was skeptical. And he said, "Well, show me what you can do." And I go, "I cannot hit you. I would just bump you with my shoulder." And so I bumped him with my shoulder, and he went back, and I wasn't trying to kill him. I just wanted him to feel the chi. And he said, "That was okay. That was all right." And I said, "Look down." And when he looked down, his shoes he was out of his shoes, and his shoes were where he was standing before. And he was like 2 feet behind that. So I knocked him out of his shoes. And it was, like I said, a very different type of art. Again, what appears to be real is not real, and what appears to be not real is real. And this was my introduction to mind training in this way. I've been training before in mind and self-hypnosis and all sorts of stuff like that, but this was very directed towards some purpose. But it wasn't the purpose I was looking for. I had no interest in beating people up. but it was a step along the way. And then one day, my law partner, was an attorney by trade. I just retired. He was walking around the office and going like this, and I'm going, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, it was just some master I saw in the park, and he was moving the people without touching them." And I was just trying to feel how he did that, and I went, "I want to meet this person." And so as we were doing this, then we got to the I met his assistant, which was a acupuncture, a Chinese lady, and so I I realized I had to go through her to get to see the master, and it was very interesting because they were doing qigong. And in doing the qigong, I remember the two teachers were there, and they saw me as a little bit different than the regular one that was coming to the class, and they went, "We do a movement like this," and I went, "Oh, I get it. It's like," and they were literally stunned by the chi I was projecting, and they just shook their head and went, "Yeah, but a little bit less intense." And so I realized this was different because it was actually something funny because I learned the Nagong before I learned the Qigong. And when I was there, eventually I got an interview with this master, and he looked at me and he says, "You are something like a judge or an attorney." And and he says, "I can see from your eyes, that you see everything." And so I said, "No, I'm an attorney." And so I had questions to ask him, and then he asked me to, or he invited me to go to, again, a closed door teaching at his home, where only his highest level students were invited. And I was the only Westerner there. Everybody else was Chinese, and everybody had some skill set or level there. They hadn't seen anything like what I had because they hadn't done Negon, and so I had many questions. And so he had said, "Go and uh, and ask your questions in the class." So all of the Chinese people were looking at me like, I don't know, what is this guy doing here? He's Megwo, he's American. What is he doing here? How is he qualified? He doesn't even look Chinese. And so then I asked the questions to the master, and the questions were very high level, and the people that were in there didn't even know the key I was playing, and they didn't know what these questions were when I was talking about, if you're vibrating the lower dandian, do you do this or do you do that? And so the level was something that the people were going, huh? What is he talking about? And so as a result of that, I was able to stay in the class. So I passed the test. And then I became actually that master's successor. And this wasn't just a regular qigong master. He was extremely popular in China. I remember going there on a tour bus, and we'd end up going to locations, and there'd be hundreds of people waiting to see him. So he was very, very popular, and even the people in the factory were directed to perform his forms. There's a a lot. I mean, I'm skipping through so many different strange things that happened to me along the way. Um, but just to show you the level of this master, and he was a great healer. Um, Great. I mean, he was good at healing people and doing things that were absolutely amazing. I once took one of my friends to him that had a chronic back problem, really bad back problem, and he treated him. And the guy says, "Oh, I feel really good. I feel good. When do I come back?" And I remember because the master said, "Why? Why what? Why would you need to come back?" And the person was thinking, like chiropractic treatments where you're going to have 10 sessions or whatever. No, it was like that. And then I realized there's a lot more to healing than there is. And maybe if I pass the Pepsi challenge, you can invite me and I can talk more about some of these topics because they're quite interesting in terms of healing. But um, I had began to practice in healing and giving people treatments as well. Again, that's a whole, I mean, very amazing aspect. Um, and from that, I understood how to utilize the mind for many different things. One is to heal people, and also to for whatever you wanted to do. I mean, literally, you could go into people's dreams. You could travel. I know some of your fans or people followers are interested in that. I won't go into too much detail, but you could go to different places or different levels of different things. And so all of this was before I began to practice Chan, but the skill set of that, it was very amazing. The ability to be able to see a person and see the chi in their body or blockages in their body, just as if you're flipping um, a lens and you wanted to see heat in the body, you'd see heat. You want to see obstructions, you'd see obstructions. No, you would see things very amazing. And again, these are all things that that are the product of working mind. The I still had a very much doubts about the practice though, and there was a time when coming into Los Angeles, there was like a qigong master arriving like every week, and when they arrived in LA, the Chinese people would say, "Have you met Gilbert?" And they go, "No, who's Gilbert? Oh, you got to go meet Gilbert." And so then they'd come to see me, and they they would show me what they could do, and whatever they could do, it was very interesting. I could crack the code very quickly. Some people they were those ones that study numbers. Others were very good healers. Other people had could generate a lot of chi, but they were all kind of like one trick ponies. They had this one thing that they perfected. And but my thing was I just wanted to pick up things, as they were, and then eventually there were times when some masters could see that I could see how they were doing it, and so they would try to hold back so that they wouldn't lose their their level of doing things. They essentially showed their level by holding back. To me, I anybody who wanted to learn, I would teach them. But yet, I still thought, what is this all about? What does it mean? So I would always ask the masters, why do you practice? And they would give me this kind of a Miss Universe answer. Oh, for the betterment of all good and for peace in the world, whatever. And when they said it, they knew that I knew that it was baloney. They really didn't know. But I wanted to know why I was practicing. this was important to me since I was a little kid. I wanted to know what's the purpose of me being here. What's this? It wasn't for me to beat up people like in kung fu, or it wasn't me to perform all of these parlor tricks for people. Actually, later on, I found out the thing with my partner was doing that people could be moved is actually a very low level skill, and very easily performed. Um, but at the upper levels, it still left me wanting what what I should do. And what was this all about? I then was practicing with a another master. At that point, I was kind of like a Ronin, a Japanese Ronin without a master and looking for a master. And I ran into this one master um, that qigong master that was very, very popular. And so when I went to see him, um, it was very interesting because I had to pass a test to be able to be one of his students. So he called in his wife into the room. It was very traditional Chinese seating and stuff. And she was sitting on one side. And he says, "What do you see is wrong with my wife?" And I looked at her and said, "You're just trying to trick me. There's nothing seriously wrong with her, but she does have stomach problems." And I went on to mention the things that she had, and with the nod, I knew that I hit it right on the head. And so then she left, and he says, "Okay, you can practice." And I was practicing with this master, and these kind of things that your group might be interested in. But I didn't like this master's methods because the qigong I had learned was called Wei To qigong. Wei To is a dharma guardian, and so it was Buddhist oriented. And this particular master was ally oriented, which is something very interesting because people go, "Okay, well, we're talking about qigong. I know how to do qigong," but ally oriented was utilizing either some celestial being or other type of a being to gather the chi to be able to do things. And so it's a very quick shortcut, but it's a dirty shortcut to get power right away. And because um, you owe something to these allies if you're going to utilize their power. And again, this might be something that people will go, "What are you talking about?" But what appears to be uh, unreal is real. What are you talking about? So that I saw one of his students, a really tiny girl, maybe 90 pounds, moving around and dancing like a fairy, and then she would point to the people where they had a problem in their body. She was accurate. She was good, but I could see from where she got the power. And then I remember she was analyzing me, and then she touched me in my shoulder. At that point, I was pretty well muscled, and it felt like an eagle clawing into me. And I went, "This is not a regular human power. That there's no way that she can exhibit this kind of a force to be able to squeeze so tight like that. There was just no way she could do it." So I realized that these people, they were connecting into something else. This is all important because it's all connected into me meeting Master Sheng Yen. And so after a while, as practicing with him, I kind of lost my interest, and I was still looking for a master. And by the way, when I went there and I told this master, Master Hong Lu, what I was looking for. I said, I'm looking for this kind of master. He said right away, I am not the master you're looking for. And I said, yes, I understand that, but can I just practice with you for a while? It's very interesting, very odd response on my part. And he said, okay, fine, you can do that, because my skill set was one which was very good for him to showcase to others. And so as I was there, I had lost my interest in there, and he was doing some really rudimentary things like taking a string and going like this on some kind of a pendulum, and doing divination like that, which really wasn't necessary, and it was a very low level skill. So I was quickly deciding I wasn't going to practice with him anymore. At that time, then, because this is how it's very incredible in terms of how people meet, I had in my heart, I want to find a master. And my wife at that time, she said, I just heard from one of my friends that this very important Chan master is going to go to UCLA to give a speech. And I'm about 60 miles away, and the speech was going to happen in around 2 hours. But nevertheless, I said, let's go. Let's go see this master. And so when we went to see the master, we went in this great auditorium. It was totally packed, and there was actually people sitting in the stairs. Luckily the fire department didn't come because it was packed, except for 2 seats, which were right directly in front of the master. This was Master Sheng Yen. And I looked at my wife and I said, what the heck, let's go. So we walked up there like we belonged, and then proceeded to sit right in front of him. And I was sitting directly in front of him. So all there was just this little thin table between us. And he began to speak, this little wisp of a man, very thin, very smiley face. It's incredible. The smile just radiated from him, and you could feel the well-being in you. You wanted to be close to him. And so as he was beginning to speak, I closed my eyes and just assumed a meditative position for his entire speech. I didn't open my eyes. I was just listening to him. And what he said was so simple because it was a general audience. But what he said was so infused with everyday wisdom, it was very amazing. I kept thinking, yes, yes, yes. This is the way it is. This is what I'm looking for more. And he would just keep doing, and it was such a basic lecture, but the wisdom that was so infused in that, and his simplicity in explaining was amazing. I mean, it was just at that moment, before I opened my eyes, I had decided I was going to follow this master. And then at the conclusion of his speech, I opened my eyes and he was smiling at me, and he just nodded to me like that, like a knowing nod, like didn't say a word, and at that point we left right away because all of the people rushed towards the stage to want to talk to him or to get closer to him. And I had heard what I needed to hear. I didn't need to shake his hand or to do anything. We were gone. And parallel action here was that on that day when the leader of the Dharma drum group that I belonged to in LA, now I belonged, at that point I hadn't, picked him up at the airport to go to this lecture. He said to her, I'm looking for this Western attorney that's going to help me. You need to go out to find him. And she said, I do not know Westerners. Not one Westerner do I know, much less an attorney. how is that even possible that I'm going to be able to do this? He says, you will find him. You will find him. And she just shook her head and said, that's impossible. So Friday comes along, and I'm driving into the qigong class with my wife, and I say, you know what? This is the last time we're coming. I'm done. We're through. There's no reason for me to learn from this master. It's dirty cheap, and I don't like that. I would never use an ally for anything. The allies, they will take your wife, they'll take your money, they'll take everything from you because they come to collect. So, so I said, I'm not going to do that. And so then I decided not to go there anymore, just this one class. Meanwhile, at the master's location, this person, Li Shuping, which was the leader of the LA group, was talking to this master about the possibility of him giving a treatment to Master Sheng Yen. And because Master Sheng Yen always had some kinds of health problems. So she was talking to him, and at the very end of their talk, she said, hey, you wouldn't happen to know a Western attorney, would you? And he said, yes. She says, you really? Yes, I know a Western attorney. As a matter of fact, he's going to be here in about 10 minutes. She said, what? And she said, can I wait for him? And he said, of course, you're welcome to stay here and wait for him. So I come walking in the door, and Li Shuping jumps up from her seat like as it was like spring and loaded, and comes running to me, and she says, I represent Master Sheng Yen. I said, yes, I know who he is. She goes, you know who Master Sheng Yen is? I go, yes. And she said, um, and I said, as a matter of fact, I was at his lecture. And she said, really? Yeah. And she said, he wants to know if you will. I said, yes, of course. Of course, what? Of course, I will help him. So I'm finishing her sentences with my own answer. And she's so confused. And she's saying, wait, I haven't even asked you. I said, I've already going to made a decision to follow him. So I will help him in any way I can. And she says, this is very, very confusing, but very interesting. So then she went back to see Master Sheng Yen. Master Sheng Yen, she said, I found him. I found this Western attorney. I don't know how, but he appeared, and he was at your lecture last night. And I never told her where I was sitting. I just said I went to his lecture. So I just said, yeah, I went to the lecture. And so he says, and he has a Chinese wife, and then Master Sheng Yen just smiled, and he said, yes, I know. She goes, what? He says, yes, his practice is very good. She's going, what? You saw him? Yes. He was sitting right in front of me. And so she was so stunned by that, but that's how Master Sheng Yen and I made the connection. I was looking for this master, and he was looking for somebody that would help him. And it fit quite wonderfully. Kind of the postscript to that is later on, I asked Master Sheng Yen, who were those seats for that I took that day? And he said, those were for VIPs. So some VIPs missed out on their seats, but I guess that day I was the VIP. So I began to study with Master Sheng Yen, and it was quite an interesting thing because I was going to go to a retreat, a 7-day retreat. And at that point, I didn't have any worry about going to retreat because I could sit 2 hours very easily and not have any problems. So I went to the retreat early and began to sit, and then the retreat started, and I knew right away that I was in trouble because for some reason, I my legs started hurting me, hurting me very, very bad, and they were still in the instructions. We hadn't even started the retreat yet, so you know things are going to go bad when your legs are hurting you, and they haven't even finished the instructions. And in a Dharma Drum Chan retreat, the instructions are are so extensive. It takes maybe an hour and a half of time to give the instructions of all the things you can do and all the things you can't do. And I was in trouble. So around the second full day, I was suffering very, very bad, really bad. Um, I wanted to leave the retreat. Um, and I actually held a mental auction of how much I would pay to, and nobody would know that I ever came to this retreat. So I got up to about $20,000. So what's worth $20,000? Yeah, just to get up off the seat. Nobody knew I came here. Like erase it all. I was suffering really bad. And in those days, the retreats were very much stricter, and you couldn't do anything. If you're sitting there, you could not move. And they had put me between two stone lions. They never moved. You know, I even questioned whether they were still alive because they did not move. But I was suffering so much. And then I remember kind of going up like this just to scratch my nose and no moving. And it scared me. And I'm going like, what? I just moved to and so I was so stunned, but all the foulness in me that's ever been there came out during that session. And I was even thinking, you know, how cruel Master Sheng Yen is to have people sit like this in suffering. This is incredible. Why would you make people do this? This is some kind of a, you know, a sadistic way of teaching people. This was horrible. And that timekeeper, if he hits that stick again, I'm going to go over there and stick it up. Well, you know where. I mean, foulness of foulness of foulness of what I of of the self that came out as if like this demonic self just turns around and looks at you and goes, you know, you have no hope here. And finally, you hear the click click ding, and I went out to the front, and in the front, the antechamber to the Chan Hall had a statue of Quan Yin Bodhisattva. And the Quan Yin Bodhisattva represents compassion. And so I began to talk. Hey, listen, I'm suffering here. I'm really, really hurting. I don't know if I can do this, but I have students following me at home. By then, I was transitioning out of teaching qigong and into Chan. And I go, I can't be a failure here. If I fail them. I can't do that. I don't want to do that. I want to, yes, my ego's saying I don't want to do that, but there's more to it than that. There are all the people that are relying on me to do all of this. And I, at that moment, um, I started doing prostrations. Prostrations, you go all the way down to the floor, and then you come up, and then you start again. And after a while, I realized that they had already started the the next sitting. I was totally unaware of that. So I went over and I knew that the penalty for not going into the room right away was you had to sit and kneel. So I went to the timekeeper and sat in front of him. And he says, "What are you doing?" I said, "I arrived late." And he goes, "Just go back to your cushion." So I went back to my cushion. And by the way, there was a change in the timekeepers from the one that said, "Don't move," to this one. And so I sat down, and something very strange happened. I didn't have any pain, not one sense of pain. I had this incredible sense of well-being, of peace in my heart. And I was in awe of that. Like, how could things change so quickly? Again, what appears to be unreal is real. In that moment, all of my pain, all of my suffering, all of that was washed away. I sat so peacefully and so carefully, mindfully, no worry about the thoughts coming back in of pain. And I remember when I heard ding, I immediately stood up as if I was some kid, 14-year-old on, spring legs, and I literally I stood up and I went, ta-da. And it was strange because I was going like, this is a magic trick. How could that happen? And I moved my legs. They had no pain. And it was amazing. The very fact of what happened that night is the very fact that I'm talking to you now. That was my vow to Quan Yin Bodhisattva, that I would help. And I would help people remove their suffering, deliver them from suffering. And I never stopped after that. It just became more and more of a purpose to live, was this incredible compassion, this unbridled compassion. Last week or recently, Steve had a guest, Henry Shukman, and is that how you pronounce his name?
That's right.
Yeah. And he was talking about this book he wrote, wonderful book about love. And this love of where he's talking about is actually this beyond love. And he kind of explained it that it was kind of a beyond the regular love. But in the Abhidharma, they talk about two words that are very important. The first one is metta. And metta means loving kindness. This kindness that we display to everyone around us. And then the other is the Karuna, Karuna. Karuna is the next word following metta in the Abhidharma for a definition. And this definition is that which that one has an interest in the suffering of others. And in this interest in suffering of others, it is that we care for them. And it's undifferentiated, undiscriminated to whoever needs help. We provide that comfort, that vow to help people, to have an interest in taking away the suffering. We utilize wisdom to bring out this great compassion. So what Henry was talking about was great compassion. This is this love. This is where this love goes to, is this great compassion. So when I was listening to the lecture, I was going, yes, this is it. This is how one does this, is this great compassion is unbridled, meaning that it's not limited in any way. We give great compassion to all sentient beings. It doesn't matter what kind of a sentient being it is. And there was one example that I used called little baby dead raccoon compassion, which is if somebody was to see a little baby dead raccoon, they would look at it and go, oh, the little baby dead raccoon, it's dead. Don't worry, I will dig a hole and put you in it, cover it all up and put some flowers there for you. And this is compassion, yes. But what about if you ran into a rat? And would you do the same? No, you would go A lot of people would just go and grab a shovel, pick it up, and throw it in the trash can. This is the first one is a limited conditional compassion. It has to look good. And as interesting in terms of this, one of my students um, uh, was texting to me that she had accidentally run over a baby squirrel. And she felt so sad that she ran over the baby squirrel. And she said it even still had a nut in its mouth. So how, running across the road so happy with a nut in its mouth and then it gets squished. And she feels so guilty about that. And I was telling her, yes, it's fine to do all of that, but that kind of compassion has to be across the board to all sentient beings. Even if one was to kill an ant, one would be mindful that that life was taken, and we are aware of that. We are aware that all animals they have suffering, so we don't limit ourselves to the compassion of friends, of fellow practitioners, or whatever. Everyone receives this kind of love or compassion. It is, excuse me, it is what is set forth in the Heart Sutra. Many people who are Buddhist or beginning Buddhist, that's probably the first sutra they run into is the Heart Sutra. But yet we don't understand what the Heart Sutra means. The Heart Sutra is actually a Mahayana manifesto changing the perception that one uses versus an Abhidharma way of looking from Theravadan of that everything is real. And the Heart Sutras actually follows section by section the opening of the Abhidharma that talks about how everything is real. It's a negation of that. And it's saying that, no, everything is empty. Now, as I get perhaps maybe come back, I'll talk about this emptiness in more detail, but I want to finish with a little bit of this discussion of the Heart Sutra, which is that in normal wisdom sutras, which this is, it's kind of like a sutrette from the reflecting the all the way from the 8,000 line to 100,000 line Mahaprajna Paramita Sutras. It would be Manjusri, the Bodhisattva wisdom that would be talking to Subhuti. Here it's different. It is the Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara, which is Quan Yin, known for compassion, that's speaking to Sariputra. The reason is because Sariputra represents that everything is real. No, Sariputra, form is not other than emptiness. Emptiness is not other than form. But then why would Quan Yin be the one that's speaking to him? If it's a wisdom sutra, it should be the Manjusri. It is because in the sutra, it's showing the product of this wisdom and showing the efforts of perfected wisdom that one gets to Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Now, this Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi is the last vestiges of what we call wisdom. It's at the door of awakening and the door of complete enlightenment that this Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, this highest unexcelled wisdom, is there. And the product of it is compassion. That's what's important. And so that's what Henry was bouncing off of in his book. And I'm just kind of explaining it in a more um, Buddhist way of looking at it, and seeing this as the highly perfected um, wisdom, to the extent that there's no longer any wisdom, and one is delivering sentient beings of an illusory nature. The sentient beings, what we perceive to be us, is no longer seen as to be real, but they're something worth saving because they belong to mind. And when we are looking at this, we understand that there is this great compassion to alleviate the suffering of all of these appearances. But in fact, all of these appearances are not other than mind itself. There is a statement in the Chan liturgy: to know all the Buddhas of the past, present, and future, perceive that all dharmadhatu nature, all phenomena, is created by the mind. When we understand that, then we understand Chan Buddhism is going to the source of mind. It is not two, non-dual. It's not even one. It is where the one returns to. This is inconceivable. If we can transcend that, then the mind is liberated. It's free. It may not be completely liberated, but it is now awakened to this. And then the mind accords with everything that is appearing and applies this unbridled compassion that's there. And that's what's so important to this, is that the product of this wisdom, which at some point then no longer is wisdom and no attainment, is just simply mind itself. A character of mind is this compassion. And when we look at the body and we analogize it to the body of the Buddha, which is everything, how wouldn't the Buddha, if there was an injury to this hand, use this hand to heal it? It all belongs to the same body. That's about as far as we can get conceptually about it, but we have to go beyond that to let go. And that will require more. I think I'm probably running out of time. Am I not?
Well, not really. I mean, we have as much time as we need, but on the other hand, you've hinted at a sequel, and I think that would be also very interesting. You're at a point now, you've made contact with Master Sheng Yen, and that is quite a pivot point in your life, a real watershed, which leads to even more remarkable things than you've described so far, and you've described many remarkable things. So I think it would be really excellent to give that its own episode, Master Sheng Yen onwards. What do you think?
I think that would be great. Again, I can still infuse it with all these little interesting stories. And as I began to practice Chan, there were many, many stories that were there. And perhaps if you have a little bit of time, I'll finish with a story of a transition that moved me from qigong to Chan. And it's kind of an interesting story. I mentioned that I was pretty good at healing, a little bit more than pretty good. And one of my friends, a chiropractor, called me one day, and he told me that his father was ill. Now, at this point in my practice, my healing techniques and analyzation of people's illnesses was pretty sophisticated. So as he's talking to me, his father appears in front of me like a hologram, and and you're just kind of rotating around the body and seeing it and seeing what's there. And again, like a hologram, it's no longer just a corporal body that one's seeing, but one's seeing through the body. And he was saying that his father needed a treatment. And I said, I cannot help your father. Your father is seriously ill and he has a problem with his liver. Now, he's never said that to me. I just saw that. And he says, yes, he has a cancer of the liver. And I said, yes, he's terminal. And he said, yes. And so I cannot take away that cancer at this point. It's too advanced. And he said, yes, but he has a problem. He cannot urinate. And it is something horrible because he cannot urinate, and it's causing him great suffering. So I said, okay. At this point, I was still an attorney. So I said, bring him over this evening and I will talk to him. So he brought his father over to my house to give him a treatment. And his father came in, a very delightful fellow, very much understanding his situation. It's very noble to see somebody who is seriously ill like that, that's terminal, and is facing it with no fear. That's brave and very unusual. And so we sat and we talked for about 2 hours about different things in life. I never mentioned the word Buddhism, never mentioned the word Chan, just talking as if Master Sheng Yen would talk to a person that's ill, and to let them leave any questions that they have and present things in a way to prepare them for what's coming, which is what I did. Meanwhile, I was also giving him a treatment as he was sitting in my living room. And so after a while, I said, look, at the time, it's very late, you need to go. And he goes, but wait, you haven't given me a treatment yet. I already did, but I don't think he would have believed that. So I put him on a table and then just kind of massaged and said, okay, you're done. And it was very brief, but it was just, to make him think he got a treatment from that. And so the next day, his son calls me up and says, thank you for helping my father. He wants you to give him another treatment. And at that point, I said, I cannot. I cannot give him one because it would be a bit of an abomination for me to do that, because he has to follow his natural course. And when I was young and I was practicing qigong, I had that kind of a situation before, which I kept the person going, and then really felt that it wasn't right, that I didn't know I could do it, but I did it. And then the next time I saw them, and they were on their deathbed, and they put their hand out like, please, give me qi. So I gave them qi, and I felt like I was being sucked dry. And then I realized that was not appropriate, and I shouldn't be doing that. So I told them, I kind of begged off of that. And then about maybe 45 days later, I get a call from my friend again, and he said his father passed and he wanted to thank me. And I said, thank me for what? And he said, because from the day that you saw him till the day that he died, there was not one day that he didn't mention what you and him talked about. And in that moment, then I realized what kind of a doctor I had to be. I'm not a doctor to heal illnesses, physical illnesses. but a Chan doctor, one that spreads the dharma and alleviates the real true suffering. And that was my calling. And that was the pivotal moment after meeting Master Sheng Yen that I chose Chan and put aside the qigong completely. I still practice qigong. I still can do things, but I don't really emphasize that. I don't try to cultivate it or anything. I'm saying this now because the importance was that this Chan was my calling. It's all since then has been my calling and has been the manner in which I live my life. And in this way, I I feel like I'm the richest man in the world. And I want to share that kind of richness with others. It doesn't matter to me how rich I am. I'm only rich enough to be able to give to others. And that was important. And that was the change. Now I'm full blown into the Chan practice. So thank you, Steve.
Thank you. May I ask one follow-up question?
Sure.
In your Qigong days, your closed door days and those healings, you mentioned this method of ally work. Something else that sometimes pops up in those kind of circumstances is exorcisms of various types, entity work and so on. I'm wondering if you ever encountered that in those years of your training.
Still, the thing is that people are ill for three different reasons. One of them is that they're ill physically, one karmically, and the third is because there is some kind of a vexing spirit around them, whether it's a ghost or a demon or what. Um, so, that would take another session, all of it on its own, to talk about those types of things. I don't fancy myself nor hold out a shingle to say I'm a ghostbuster. I really don't like that, and there's times and occasions when those things present themselves to you, and it's like you've got to do it, but you have to be very careful and respectful for them. Master Shen Hua from the Thousand Buddha Temple, in his lifetime, he challenged the ghost, and they almost killed him. So I'm very respectful about the power of these kinds of entities, but you don't challenge them. You cannot heal people, and you're not healing just the person that's sick, but you're healing the one that's affecting them, because that one too has a mind's disease, which is that they feel like they have to extract retribution. So when one approaches these, we approach it with light and love, and you make the decision that you want to give transfer merit to not only the person that's ill, but the entities that are causing them these kinds of illnesses. And so it's instead of trying to banish them, to chase them out, we try to deliver them as well. And sometimes it takes a long time to be able to get them to accept that. But if you can, then it can really change things. I have one now. It's a 9-year-old boy that had terminal stage 4. I shouldn't say terminal, but he had stage 4 cancer. Poor, beautiful little boy. And but the story is a very long story. Suffice it to say, there are some things that were affecting him. And again, this is like a very, very long story still going on, but the boy is very vibrant right now. And those ghosts or enemies or whatever it was not even of him, but of his father, are contented and leaving him alone. And so these are the ways that we do things. We have to feel, we have to understand and use our perception, not the perception of a sentient being, but the perception, the Buddha perception, to be able to see this. The perception that we use is from the five skandha: form, sensation, perception, volition, and consciousness. Those are empty. When Avalokiteshvara was coursing through the deep prajna paramita, he perceived that all five skandha are empty. He's using Buddha perception, which is not a linear perception. It is omniscience, and it understands and it incorporates wisdom and compassion together. This is how one addresses these kinds of issues. And so at any given point, I do that. Plus, I in my nightly transferring of merit, I include all of the sentient beings in the lesser realms and try to visualize them and visualize that the suffering that they have, whether it's the eagle that has to tear apart a flesh to live, or the rat that's being torn apart. All of these things we see as causes and conditions of this world. We see all of these sufferings that are there. But it's very interesting because this little boy I'm talking about, his mom brought him to my Zoom meeting on last Monday. And he said, he had a beautiful question. He said, how do the Buddhas see the world? And this question brought a great joy to my heart. And I think he was very surprised because I said, the Buddhas, they see this world like a Pure Land. That all of these things that appear to be real are not real. They're just an illusion, a phantasm, a dream. To them, this world is neither sacred nor profane. It's liberated. And when the mind sees things in this way, it sees it as real. There was a story of the Buddha, and Shakyamuni Buddha, and Sariputra asked him a question. And historically, and I can get into that next time, because there's a reason why Sariputra was mentioned there, because he was a proponent of the Abhidharma, everything is real. But he asked the Buddha, and you have to visualize this and feel this. You're there with the Buddha, and Sariputra says, and I'll use vernacular of today, but essentially it kind of grates the same way. He said, world honored one, all of the Buddhas, they have wonderful pure lands and everything else, but when I look around your land, this is your land, it's so crappy. And it's so bad, like, why would you do this? Why is this your land? What you don't, and you could imagine all the other disciples just going, oh my God, I can't believe he just said that the Buddha's land is crappy. Essentially, he said that, that it's so foul and whatever. And the Buddha said, it's only your perception, your discriminating perception, that you see this in this way. And so the Buddha was cross-legged, and he extended one of his legs and he touched the floor, and instantly everything converted into this beautiful land, a beautiful pure land. And Sariputra was looking at it and going, where did this come from? And he said, it's always been there, but due to your discriminations, you cannot see things in this way. And as a result of that, you cannot see things, then you create from your illusory sense this horrible world. But it isn't in that way. That's a dream. And so we look at things in this way. That's why I say when you are the richest person in the world, you see the things as they are, not as the appearances. And you see that you need to awaken people to this kind of a life, of or not life, excuse me, of this reality. And I hesitate to say reality because it's an absolute reality. Um, and it is hard for us to understand that because we're constantly trying to testify that this world is real. But extending outside that is different. And in the next time we talk, I will talk about my experiences in terms of that, and that will help people understand how this all fits together. And but that's kind of it. So the little boy's question was a very amazing and timely question. One last thing about him is that he one day was in the hospital room in Taiwan during the daytime, and Quan Yin Bodhisattva appeared to him, not asleep. He was sitting up, and she appeared. I shouldn't say she because neither she nor he appeared, and um, and took a particular posture and handed him something that he could actually feel like he was being handed, like a book of light. And um, it was kind of unmistakable. It wasn't some conjured up image that happened. It was something that, again, what appears to be unreal is real. And it was something very amazing because there's so many people passing merit to him to for his protection. It is only natural that the Quan Yin Bodhisattva would pay a house call to a 9-year-old boy. And this little boy is destined for great things. So I finished. Unless you have any questions.
Oh, many, but let's save them for the sequel. Gilbert Gutierrez, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You know, I sincerely appreciate the opportunity to share the Dharma with people. And if I make it interesting, you know, that keeps people going on. If it's just a dry lecture, you know, you would lose your audience with me. But hopefully I kept them interested. To all. Blessings to all of you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to another Guru Viking podcast. For more interviews like these, as well as articles, videos, and guided meditations, visit www.guruviking.com.